The judge's son smirked, like he always did, only this time he picked the wrong target, because Jalen Carter had been raised to stand his ground. Jalen was still holding his cup of juice when he heard the first comment. He didn't see who said it, but he recognized the tone. That same old laugh, the kind that comes from never being told no. Go ahead and dive in, man. Your hair won't even get wet. He was the only black kid in that circle around the pool. He had come with his older cousin. His parents were arriving later. He didn't say a word, just stepped back a few paces and waited for his turn, then dove in. Smooth, clean, barely made a splash. That's when Austin Blake turned up the volume, just like he always did when the spotlight slipped away from him. Look at that. So you knew how to swim this whole time, and here I thought y'all only ran fast. Laughter. Two boys laughed out loud. One looked down at the ground. Another pretended not to hear. Jalen stepped out of the water slowly. No smile, no rush, no fear, but with one thing crystal clear in his mind. Jalen Carter was 14, black, tall for his age, sharp eyes, steady voice. He walked like someone who knew the ground was dangerous, but wasn't afraid to step anyway. The kind of kid who listened more than he spoke. And when he did speak, it was never wasted. He was the son of Colonel Denise Carter, a woman who built a military career with the same courage she used to face the civilian world. Her word carried weight, inside the house and out. His father, Gregory Carter, was a respected civil rights attorney, known across the state of Georgia. He never bowed his head, not even in the whitest courtrooms. Together they raised Jalen the way you sharpen a blade, slowly, deliberately, not to harm, but to cut through silence when the time came. Austin Blake, on the other hand, was 13, white, only child, quick smile, sharp laugh. From a young age, he'd learned he could speak louder, and almost no one would stop him. His father was Judge Charles Blake, a heavyweight in the region's political circuit. Conservative to the bone, authoritative even in silence. His mother, Lillian Blake, was an award-winning architect, but she spent most of her time trying to mend the damage her husband left behind in their own son. Both families were members of Hillside Club, a place that sold modern values on the surface, but kept its old traditions tucked between the walls. On the membership form, the last names carried equal weight. But in practice, all it took was one look to know who was merely tolerated and who was truly welcome. In the Carter household, Jalen was never told the world was fair. But from an early age, he was taught it could be faced with dignity. His mother, even in uniform, never raised her voice at him. She didn't have to. One look was enough, and a reminder he knew by heart. You're not less than anyone, but you don't have to swallow everything in silence either. With his father, the conversations were long, always calm, like passing down tools, not weapons. You'll walk into rooms where they'll test you just for existing, but if you know who you are, no provocation can break you. Inside that home, Jalen learned that reacting didn't mean yelling. It meant choosing the right moment, and when necessary, the right tone too. At the Blake residence, the story was different. Austin grew up hearing his father say the world had become too sensitive, that nowadays anything turns into an offense. Say whatever you want, son. Only weak people get dramatic. His mother, Lillian, tried to balance things out. But it was hard to compete with the power of a judge whose word was law. Even at home, Austin was never hit, never scolded, and rarely heard the word no. He was raised to believe he was always right. Worse, that no one had the right to prove him wrong. Two homes, two mindsets, two boys on a collision course, right place, right time, all wrong. That Saturday, Jalen's parents had important commitments in Atlanta. His mother was coordinating an event with other military officers. His father was speaking on a panel about racial justice at a law institute. They knew they couldn't make it to the club in the morning, so they let Jalen go early with his older cousin, who was also a member. At first glance, everything seemed calm at Hillside. Boys his age were diving into the pool, ordering fries at the snack bar, running back and forth with towels over their shoulders. The adults moved in slow motion, quiet conversations, cold drinks, dark sunglasses. But there was something Jalen had always noticed. No matter how hard he tried to blend in, he was always the only one with dark skin in the group, the only one whose hair became the punchline, the only one who heard and pretended not to hear, just to avoid ruining the vibe. And still he showed up, just like his parents had taught him, with posture, with presence. But later that day, as he crossed the patio toward the snack bar, the stares returned. Some whispered. Others looked at his wet clothes like they broke the dress code. Even a waiter paused for a second before serving him, as if needing to confirm he was really allowed to be there. Tray in hand, Jalen was walking back to the poolside when a shoulder slammed into his, quick, dry, deliberate. The juice spilled, the sandwich hit the ground, and the voice came right after, laced in fake concern. "Oh man, my bad. Didn't even see you there." Austin, wearing that same smug smile, and surrounded by the usual audience, waiting to see what Jalen would do. Jalen didn't answer, didn't bend down, didn't pick up a thing. He just looked, and in that look, there was no doubt left. It was time to respond, loud and clear. Jalen didn't say a word, not when the tray hit the ground, not when Austin, still laughing, said again it was an accident. He stepped away in silence, walking toward the nearest water fountain, took a deep breath, drank slowly, then looked around like someone studying the terrain. At the club's front desk, a staff member was adjusting the background music. Sitting on the counter, right next to the lost and found clipboard, was the microphone used for internal announcements. Jalen had seen adults use that mic dozens of times, but never a kid. He walked back to the main area, sat down on the same bench as before, where his towel was still folded. No one said a word to him. No one offered help. No one even cleaned the spilled juice on the floor. Everything carried on as usual, as if nothing had happened, as if that's how things were supposed to be. But he knew they weren't. And when he looked down at his soaked t-shirt, fighting the lump in his throat, when he saw that tray still lying on the ground, juice spreading like liquid disrespect, he knew something had snapped. He was done. It was time for a response. Not shouting, not swinging, but with clarity, the way he'd been taught. And this time, everyone was going to hear it. While Austin laughed with his friends, clueless about what was coming, Jalen was already putting together the words inside him. And more than that, figuring out how to say them. He didn't ask for permission. He simply walked up to the sound booth, steady steps, respectful eyes, climbed the small side stage, and picked up the microphone. The front desk attendant, thinking it was about a lost item, didn't question him. Jalen nodded in thanks, turned slowly, scanned the room. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from pressure, from everything that had built up over 14 years in every black boy who heard that's not really what happened when they called out hidden racism. And then he spoke, with a clear voice, straight posture, loud and strong. "Attention, Hillside members." Silence fell. A group of parents looked up. Some boys stopped playing, others laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. Every face turned toward him, some puzzled, others already uncomfortable. Jalen looked straight at Austin, who now dropped his gaze. And then, in the firmest voice he had ever found, he continued, "My name is Jalen Carter. I'm a member of this club, just like my family. I'm the son of Denise and Gregory Carter, names you might know better than you'd like. My mother's got more medals than your pride. And my father, he defends with words the things you've never had the courage to face." Pause. "There's a boy here today who just reminded me why I was raised the way I was. Austin Blake didn't just knock over my tray. He knocked over the thing you all still pretend not to see. Today, for the 1000th time, someone made a joke about my hair, my skin, my body, but I'm still here, soaked, sure, but rooted. You know why? Because I was raised to respond, with respect, with presence, and now, with a microphone. My parents taught me that not all racism shouts. Sometimes it just knocks over your tray and says, "My bad." A nervous chuckle slipped from the back of the room, and within seconds, it spread. But this time, not at Jalen, at Austin, who shrank into his chair, unsure where to hide. The laughter died down. Now, silence again. They taught me that I'd walk into spaces where they'd think I was just an exception, or an accident, or a favor. But they also taught me I should never hide in those places. He looked straight at Austin, not with anger, but with precision. So today, I want to thank you, man, because after hearing that my hair doesn't even get wet, seeing my lunch on the floor, and finding out it's somehow surprising that I know how to swim, I realized I learned exactly what I was supposed to. I learned how to recognize when someone tries to humiliate me with a smile, and I learned how to respond, pause, with calm, with presence, and the right way. Or anything you'd like to say, Austin? Some people laughed, nervously, others clapped. Austin tried to laugh too, but it was too late. He was no longer the center, no longer the funny one, and for the first time, he had no idea what to do. Jalen's parents arrived just minutes later. They had planned to stop by the club around 4, and they were right on time. Colonel Denise Carter came straight from duty, still in uniform, her hair neatly tied in a military bun. Gregory Carter walked beside her, document folder in hand, back straight like a man who's never had the luxury of pretending to be anyone else. The moment they stepped into the lobby, they could tell something had happened. A few adults whispered, others avoided eye contact, but it was the front desk staffer who rushed to explain, "Your son used the club's microphone without permission, but it was about a situation that maybe he should tell you himself." The colonel didn't respond. She simply scanned the room, looking for Jalen. He was sitting on a bench near the side wall, with his cousin beside him. Calm, no trace of guilt. Gregory approached first. "You okay?" Jalen nodded. "I am now." Denise stepped closer. She didn't ask what happened. She just looked him in the eyes and said, "Did you say what needed to be said?" "I did." She nodded, then turned to the staffer. "Then we don't need an explanation." There was no hug, no speech. Their presence was enough. And the silence tasted like a mission accomplished. Judge Charles Blake arrived soon after, visibly angry. One of the club's security guards had informed him that his son's name had been broadcast over the sound system. He marched in quickly, face red, voice loud and commanding. "Where are this boy's parents? I demand an explanation, now." Colonel Denise turned calmly. Gregory folded his arms. Neither of them moved with urgency. "You must be the father of the boy who knocked over my son's tray and pretended it was an accident," Gregory said. "And now you want an explanation? This is defamation," the judge shot back. "They're just kids. And your son took the microphone to make a political speech in a public space." Before any other adult could respond, a new voice cut in. Calm, but firm. "I saw the whole thing, and there was nothing political about it. What I saw was courage." It was Peter Langston, a white businessman, longtime club member, and father of 2 teens who were also there that day. He'd been sitting near the game area and witnessed everything, from the first provocation to the final words. "Your son humiliated that boy in public. What he got in return was education." The room went silent. Lillian Blake, Austin's mother, slowly stepped forward. She didn't say a word. She just looked at her husband. Tense face, trembling chin. Charles Blake tried to hold his posture, but something in the air had shifted. For the first time, the most powerful man in the room wasn't the one people were listening to. He turned to the Carters, clinging to the last shred of his authority. "Just so you know, I'm the one who signs off on the legal contracts here, including membership renewals." The words dropped like lead, but no one responded. They didn't need to. He then snapped his fingers subtly toward his son. "Austin, let's go." And the boy hesitated. He wanted to push back, maybe deny, but his father's glare silenced him before he could even try. They walked through the lounge like people who knew that, no matter how much power they had at home, in that moment, in that place, they had lost, without shouting, just by truth. At the door, Charles muttered one last jab under his breath. This country's really turning upside down. And then, they were gone. But the silence they left behind didn't last long. Because as they walked out, the hillside board was already gathering in a back room, and when the reaction comes from the top, the system always finds a way to pretend it never happened. By late afternoon, as some members were already leaving Hillside, 3 board members huddled inside a glass-walled office next to the front desk. The door was slightly ajar. Their expressions were tense. Words like image, embarrassment, and overreaction floated in the air. The next morning, the Carters were called in for a meeting, an open conversation, they were told, but they knew exactly what it was: damage control. They arrived 10 minutes early, Denise in her dress uniform, posture sharp, Gregory in a crisp suit, glasses perfectly in place, phone in hand, ready to record the conversation. The board members, all white, sat around the long conference table. Coffee was served, the AC was blasting, their tone polite, their smiles practiced. But the subtext, all too familiar. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, thank you for accepting our invitation," said the director, rising to greet them. He had grey hair, a soft voice, and restless eyes. His name was Robert Hastings. Gregory nodded. Denise didn't smile. They sat side by side, facing Hastings. He began, just as expected. "First of all, I'd like to apologize on behalf of the institution. We understand your point of view." "Of course we do," chimed in another board member, fidgeting with the papers in front of him. "But maybe it's best to just leave things here. No need to escalate. No need to make this bigger than it is." Gregory took a breath, crossed his legs calmly, then rested his hands on his knees and answered, "It's not our son damaging the club's image. It's the culture you allowed to grow here." The director gave a weak, awkward smile. But Colonel Denise pressed further. "If Hillside is so concerned with reputation, then maybe it's time to be concerned with accountability too. Because what our son did was defend himself, with clarity, with composure, with boundaries. What you allowed to happen here crossed every one of them." She held her gaze on the 3 men at the table. "What you did was pretend not to see." Again, Gregory pulled a folder from his case and slid an envelope to the center of the table. "These are testimonies from other black teens who've come through this club. Some stopped coming, others still show up, quietly, but all of them were pushed aside." Silence. Until one board member gently suggested, "Maybe a joint statement. Something simple, just to show unity, avoid noise." Denise and Gregory exchanged a look. And in that look, the decision had already been made, but the final answer wouldn't come from that room. It would be written and published, for whoever wanted or needed to read it. So Denise stood and delivered the closing words. "We're not here because of a spilled tray, gentlemen. We're here because of a system that's worked very hard to keep things exactly as they are. But this time, you're going to have to listen." And they left, still in silence, but not out of omission, out of strategy, because that conversation was only the beginning. And while that meeting was taking place, the image of Jalen holding the microphone no longer belonged to the club. It belonged to history. Someone, maybe one of the teens who laughed without knowing why, had recorded the whole thing. The mockery, the shove, and most importantly, the response. The video started small, circulating among school parents, then through the Hillside group chats, but within hours it hit social media like lightning. 14-year-old black kid shuts down racist club with flawless speech. Jalen Carter. Memorizing that name should be part of the curriculum. If my kids hear half of what this boy said, their education is worth it. Jalen's face became a screenshot. His words became posts, and more than that, they became a mirror. Black teens shared it silently, tears in their eyes. Parents reflected on the conversations they'd never had with their own children. Teachers printed the transcript and pinned it to their boards. Artists performed excerpts at cultural events. Meanwhile, the club scrambled to contain the fire with a damp cloth. They suspended use of the microphone, changed the club's code of conduct, sent out internal memos asking for respect toward institutional privacy. They tried reaching the Carter family to schedule another meeting, called, left messages, sent emails. But Denise and Gregory didn't reply, not out of pride, but because they had already made a decision. When a son's words echo beyond the gates of a place, it's time for a mother to speak to the world. And what she said was everything so many have never found the courage to say. 2 days later, a new wave swept through social media, but this time it wasn't a video. It was a letter, signed by Denise Carter, a black woman, a retired Army colonel, and Jalen's mother. The title was direct, the kind that stops softeners at the door. My son was raised to respond. Are yours ready to listen? The letter opened in a calm, steady tone. It recounted what happened, plainly, without names or exaggeration, but with enough truth to cut through every social euphemism. Then came the weariness, the collective exhaustion of having to act like nothing happened, of how the black community was taught from early on to keep the peace, even when the conflict came from the outside. I grew up hearing we had to keep our heads down, that a well-behaved black child was one who didn't talk back, didn't question, didn't make trouble. But when I saw my son on that stage of humiliation, responding with dignity, I knew I had done everything right. Because respect doesn't mean silence. It means knowing exactly when to speak. With each paragraph, the letter deepened, in truth and in pain. At Hillside Club, my son was provoked, shoved, ridiculed, and still, he didn't shout. He didn't raise a hand. He answered with something that still makes people uncomfortable. Presence. And when he spoke, with that microphone in hand and a chest full of memory, it wasn't just for him. It was for every boy who ever swallowed his pain. For every parent who's tired of preparing their kids to survive spaces that never wanted them there. In the second half, Denise dropped all diplomacy. This is a warning. We are raising our children not to look down, to recognize the worth they carry in their skin, and if you're still raising yours, to care only for themselves, believing the world belongs to them, get ready, because ours are coming. With books in hand, with diplomas, with clear voices, and with the certainty that they will never apologize for existing. She closed with a call. To black parents, you are not alone. To allies, now is the time to rise with us, and to those who prefer silence, know this, the world has already started listening, and once heard, it can't be unheard. Within 12 hours, the letter had gone viral. In newspapers, on podcasts, in classrooms. Not because it was provocative, but because it was undeniable. Teachers printed it. Churches read it aloud in services. Public figures shared it. Educators, artists, athletes, legal scholars. Parents wrote emotional responses. Young people shared their stories in the comments, but no one expected what would come 4 days later. Walter E. Grayson, president of Hillside, a white man known for staying behind the scenes, published an official statement. But it wasn't a standard PR move. He didn't dodge. He said he had read the letter more than once, and that it had shaken him and stripped away his comfort. To the Carter family and to every family who saw themselves in this story, this institution has heard you, and we acknowledge where we failed. The statement continued, announcing the suspension of board members who had remained silent, the launch of a diversity committee with outside advisors, and a public invitation for Denise Carter to join the Institutional Conduct Review Board. We can't change what happened, but we can change who we are because of it. It was the first time Hillside had been forced to respond, not because of legal threats, but because of moral weight. And it all started with a 14-year-old boy and a mother who chose not to stay silent. It wasn't the end of the fight, but it was, without question, the end of indifference. After Hillside's official statement, some familiar faces quietly stopped showing up at the club. The Blake family was one of them. Sources close to them said Charles Blake submitted his voluntary resignation less than a week after the backlash. "Our family's image has been exposed. It's time to lay low," he reportedly told close friends, according to local media. He stepped away from public duties indefinitely. The pressure from public opinion hit him harder than any verdict he'd ever signed. In his resignation note, he blamed distortion of facts and ideological persecution. But anyone who saw what happened that Saturday saw what they saw. Austin also switched schools, not by expulsion, but by the family's own decision. Some claimed it was to shield him from the spotlight. But anyone who watched the video knew the lesson had already landed. Lillian, his mother, reached out to the Carters a few days later. She apologized, listened in silence. She didn't try to defend her son, and left saying she still had a lot to learn, but that she was ready to teach as well. Gregory simply said, "Start at home. That's where everything begins." And Jalen? Jalen went back to his routine. He kept going to the club, with his parents, with his cousin, not as a challenge, but as a right. He was invited to speak at school events. He wrote a short piece that was read at a community assembly, but he turned down every attempt to turn him into a symbol. "I don't want to be the kid from the video. I just want to be a kid, but one who knows when it's time to speak." And maybe that's what stayed with people the most. The words, the pause, and the choice not to stay silent. Today, Jalen still carries that day with him, but not as trauma, as a turning point, the day he truly understood what his parents had always told him, that existing with dignity in an unequal world is already resistance, but responding with courage, that's revolution. And when people ask him why he didn't just stay quiet, he smiles, not with irony, but with certainty, and says, "Because I was raised for this." Jalen's story doesn't end at Hillside, because racism doesn't end there either. It's not just a behavioral flaw, it's a structure. It lives in the jokes masked as humor, in the silence disguised as neutrality, in clubs that call themselves inclusive, right up until they're challenged. And it only changes when someone decides to stop pretending not to see, when parents raise their children with awareness, when those children learn to respond with presence, and when entire communities refuse to let the next generation fight alone. So if this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Comment below what resonated with you the most. Tell us if you know someone like Jalen, or if you're raising someone like him. This channel exists for that, to amplify voices, to make visible what others try to keep hidden. And remember, every voice that stays silent is a door racism walks through. Every voice that speaks up is a chance to change the world. One story at a time. Subscribe to the channel. Here, every story has a soul.